In this Elden Ring Nightreign video, I'm going to be giving you guys further tips on how to play Wylder, and I'm going to do something that I haven't done since Divinity Original Sin 2 content, and that's I'm actually going to do a run through the game as Wylder, and I'm going to kind of explain to you my decision-making process along the way so that you can understand why I've made decisions about Wylder in an attempt to show you how you might make better decisions about the gear that you pick up when playing Wylder. And people seem to really enjoy when I did this in Divinity Original Sin 2 for my builds. It gave them a better insight into the thought process behind what decisions I was making, helped them make better decisions. And there are really limited ways in order to show how to play Wylder in this game because the gear that you get is so randomized. So we're going to do a run through, but before we get into the run through, I just want to go through some brief tips on weapon selection process, how I generally play my Wylder, and also like what relics I'm using. So when you're playing Wylder, he has a different moveset with the Greatsword than every other weapon, and that can lead you towards using a Greatsword. But really what makes you want to use a Greatsword as Wylder is his relic that gives you a follow-up attack when he uses Grappling Hook. That follow-up increases the range of the skill markedly. It does pretty good damage. It allows you to connect from very, very far away, and it buffs your weapon with fire damage for a certain amount of time. It is a really, really strong addition to Wylder's toolkit, and I think a lot of people really enjoy it. I do myself. I typically bring that along on my relics. But there are a couple things about it. First of all, you only hit with one Greatsword when you do this. So if you're dual wielding, the second blade is not going to connect, only the first blade does. Secondly, the fire damage is a flat plus 12 fire damage on your weapon for the duration. This doesn't scale as you get higher and higher level, which means that buff that you get on your weapon is much better earlier on Wylder than it is later. And lastly, people can fall in love so much with this ability, I know myself was enamored with it for quite a while on Wylder, that they will forego all other weapons except for Greatswords in order to keep using this, and that's something you definitely shouldn't do on Wylder. So, Wylder has probably the widest range of weapons he can use. Everyone can use everything in this game. But he has a decent health pool, he can survive melee combat because of his Sixth Sense ability a little bit easier. His Grappling Hook gets him back into melee range much more easier than a lot of other melee classes. So he can really use whatever he wants. So when you're playing Wylder, you have to decide, do you want to use a single weapon? Do you want to dual wield weapons? Or do you want to use a shield and a weapon? Now, I typically do one weapon, and then I might use a different weapon in my offhand, or I might use a shield depending on what I pick up. And I typically shy away from the dual wield moveset, although you'll see me dual wielding quite a bit in this video. And that's typically because dual wield just uses so much stamina in order to use. When you're lower levels, it can be quite difficult to pull off a lot of dual wield attacks and then still have stamina left to avoid attacks. Like, it can leave you wide open in a lot of cases because so many attacks are AoE. So I generally don't like dual wielding in this game, but you can dual wield Greatswords if you want, or in some cases you can dual wield different weapons and then switch to one of them to use its weapon skill if they have very good weapon skills, or maybe they're just appropriate for what they're doing. And I generally like the one-handed moveset on the Greatsword better than I like the two-handed moveset. I like the horizontal slashes rather than the vertical slices. It tends to cleave through multiple enemies more often, which is great, particularly if you have the relic that replenishes health back after post-damage. A lot of times when you're playing Wylder, you're just playing very, very aggressively, which because you're going for speed. You're counting on your other characters or party members to be very aggressive as well. So you'll take damage, and then you can regain that damage back with a couple of cleaving attacks, with a couple of light attacks. That'll just go through multiple enemies and get that HP back for you. That's a really good relic, by the way. I really recommend that one if you can get it, because it allows you to play more aggressively on Wylder, particularly during trash bowls and camps and things like that, where, you know, you're just trying to get through it as quickly as possible. You're not really worried about dying so much. And because the follow-up attack with the Grappling Hook only hits with one weapon, and I like that moveset better, that typically leaves my left hand open for either a different weapon that has a different weapon skill or some passive effect like bleed or poison. If I'm trying to apply that, I can switch to it real quick. Or for a shield so I can block. Particularly if you have like two other ranged characters in your group, it's not a bad idea to block. Or if you're just bad at rolling, sometimes I feel like some of the attacks in this game I'm not really good at dodging, and I can block more effectively. You just want to be careful that you're not always getting a shield on Wylder and always playing with a shield, because if you are, you might as well just play Guardian. But sometimes the game just deals you a really good shield, and it's worth picking up because it can protect you from a lot of attacks, and you might as well take it in that case. So, like I said with Wylder, there are a lot of different weapons that you should be on the lookout for, and I'll just kind of run you really quickly through my thought process on what I'm looking for when I'm picking up a weapon. The first thing I ask myself when I look at a weapon is, does it have Scarlet Rot? Yes or no? If it has Scarlet Rot, I pick it up. It doesn't even matter what type of weapon it is. If it has Scarlet Rot, I get it. Most of the endgame bosses can be Scarlet Rotted, and the easiest way to beat them is to consistently put Scarlet Rot on them. It will make your life so much easier. And since I die 99% of the time only at the last boss in any given run, I am worried about the last boss. I am not worried about every other boss until then. The next question I ask myself, if it doesn't have Scarlet Rot, is what is the weapon skill? If it has a fantastic weapon skill, something like Stormblade or some unique weapon skill, then I will pick it up. Stormblade is particularly good on any weapon. It's great on a greatsword because it allows you to hit with the projectile and the weapon simultaneously if you're in melee range, and it also gives you range if you don't. And this can be really, really strong because if you're attacking Stormblade over and over, which is about the same speed as a greatsword attack, you can actually hit with projectile and the blade at the same time, doing more damage. So if you see Stormblade on a greatsword, that's an absolute must. But I'm checking out here what the weapon skill are, like if it's Death Poker has something good like that on it, Ghost Flame Ignition, I will pick it up. It's just, what is the weapon skill? Is it good? Yes or no is the next question. So if the weapon skill is bad, then I'll look at, is it a greatsword? Yes or no. You'll notice greatsword is the third question I ask myself. It is not priority number one to get a greatsword. If it's a greatsword here, then I will take it. If it's not a greatsword, or maybe even if it is a greatsword, the next question is, does it have bleed? If you have a choice of two greatswords, I usually pick the one with bleed since it helps me get through a lot of bosses leading up to the last boss more effectively. And this can get you to a higher level by clearing bosses faster. It gives you more stats that makes the end boss easier. If it doesn't have bleed and it's a greatsword, I take it. If there are no greatswords, I prioritize the weapon with bleed. If it's a choice between a greatsword and a bleed weapon, I typically choose the greatsword, but I might choose the bleed weapon depending on the weapon. And lastly, I look at what's the passive effect of the weapon. And I do not prioritize passive effects at all when playing Wylder, which is untrue for some of the other classes I play. Iron Eye, I'm prioritizing range damage. That's what I'm looking at most of the time when I'm looking at stuff. Recluse, I'm looking at sorcery damage or incantation damage or FP cost reduction. Same goes for Revenant. When I'm playing her, I'm looking for incantation damage or FP cost reduction. And when playing Guardian, you're looking for like guard boost effectiveness or guarding of increase. But when I'm playing Wylder, I'm looking for the best weapons I can find. I don't really care about the passive effects. I'm trying to use the best weapon I can find for the bosses that I'm going to be facing. So lastly, we'll take a look at relics on Wylder. I like the relic that you get from completing his character quest line. This is a really, really strong one. It gives you an additional follow-up use of your grappling hook. This is really strong. Once you have this, you will never not use it because you can use your grappling hook for so many things. You can use it to get in range, you can use it to res teammates at range, you can use it to just pull enemies out of the sky and kill them really quickly. There are a lot of things you can do with it. It's very useful. Having two uses is so much better than having one. You'll never get rid of this once you have it. Also, the addition of spreading fire when you use your ultimate skill is so strong in this game, and you want that extra damage on targets, and there are quite a few bosses that are weak to fire as well, not just the end-of-day bosses, but regular bosses. So it's just a really, really strong ultimate combined with this. Additionally, as I already mentioned, I like the relic that gives you the follow-up on the greatsword. This one is not mandatory, but I will tell you, it makes playing Wylder feel so much better, and it's one of the reasons that you tend to prioritize a greatsword when playing Wylder, although you shouldn't do it at the cost of everything else. It's still worth having, because when you have a greatsword, you're definitely going to want to use it. Another really good relic, as I mentioned earlier, is getting the effect that gives you health back after you've taken damage if you attack. This can allow you to play more aggressively when you're just fighting regular bosses and trash mobs. That will get you through them more quickly. That will allow you to gain more XP so you're a higher level at the end of the first day. And the last relic that I recommend, which I really recommend on any character, but is getting more ultimate or increasing your ultimate gauge when you defeat enemies. This is really, really strong. It gives you so much more ultimate than you first realize, and it really makes it possible for you to just kill a couple enemies here and there and not only gain the XP from them, but also just like fill your ultimate really quickly before you run into a boss so that you can just down it really quickly, run in ult, and then finish it off. And it's actually faster in that case to kill a few enemies, fill it up, and go in and do that than to try and take the boss on without an ultimate charged up. Just makes your life so much easier. Okay, so for our run, it's Vex and I and a random that we picked up. We are going to be facing Caligo, Miasma of Night. This is the Ice Dragon at the end. So the first thing we do when we drop in is we clear the enemies ahead, and we quickly head over to the Site of Grace to get to level 2. This is something I recommend doing immediately for every character. Really helps to increase your HP pool so that you don't die inadvertently. So after we do so, we head to a nearby camp, and it happens to be Red Mane Knights. I see that the archer on our team is up in the tower taking on the one Red Mane Knight there, so I head out to get the one in the field. And you can see my ultimate art is already charged from the relic that gives you ultimate gauge when defeating enemies, because keep in mind, it's not just enemies you defeat, it's any enemies that die around you, whether your teammates kill them or another enemy kills them, they fall off a cliff, whatever. This charges a lot, so I have full ult going into this boss fight. And because of that, once I start to see things going badly when I get hit, and I got the 3 dudes right on top of me, I just go ahead and ult, wipe out 2 of them, and then finish off the knight very quickly. And if you look at my ultimate gauge, it's already 1/3 full from that relic, and this allows you to use this ult very, very often, which can make it so that you can just burst bosses down and you can get many more bosses done in a day, which allows you to get more XP and more buffs, so you're stronger going into the final boss fight. So looking at my options, none of them are particularly great. Iron Ball gives me guard boost, which is not exactly what you're going for on Wylder, although if I had a good shield it would help. Probably should have taken the Clean Rot Knight and dropped it for effects to improve recharged sorceries, but I decided to take resistances because the final boss does do frostbite buildup quite regularly, and I figured it would help me in that fight. So the next thing we do is make for the nearby church in order to get 1 flask. Again, you want to get 1 flask each day if possible, or at least 2 flasks total in your run. 3 is better, but 2 is definitely the minimum. I stop at a merchant along the way because I still don't have a better weapon, looking to see if there's something I can buy. Unfortunately, none of these are great for me, so I don't buy anything. Then I hit the nearby Site of Grace and get up to level 3. That way I can use a blue weapon if I see it and give me some extra health and stamina, etc. So after getting the church, we make our way to the fort. Vex is a recluse. Odds are there's going to be some spells in there for her to use. Recluses are not very effective without good spells, so getting them spells early is very important. And also making your way through the lake, there's typically a lot of scarabs. And sometimes there's a boss there that's easy to kill, sometimes it's hard. So I look for the scarab, don't see one, and I note that the boss is a lion boss. So after we get the fort, we'll be able to come over here and kill this boss very easily, because this is one of the more easy bosses to defeat. Once I get into the fort, I run all the way up to the top as quick as I can, bypassing all the enemies, ult the boss. We kill him very quickly, and I immediately look at what I can pick up weapon-wise, and the obvious choice here is the Flamberge. It's a great sword, it's got bleed on it, does more damage than what I have. I'm already level 3, and the Flamberge is a very, very good weapon for the Wylder class, and you should probably always try and get one if it's an option, unless there is a better weapon available. But it's a pretty good staple because most enemies and bosses can bleed. Immediately after picking up the Flamberge, I run upstairs in order to check the clues so we can see where the scarabs are located. I kill the enemies on the way, since they usually body block me on the way out, and I have the advantage since they haven't aggroed yet. And it also fills up my ult gauge because of my relic, and you'll see by the time I defeat them, I almost have full ultimate already again. And while I'm in there with the clue, I loot the staff rack. I notice there are a couple good spells that drop. These are Gravity Well and Rancor Call, so I ping them for Vex so she can come pick them up, because they will hold us in good stead throughout this run. Immediately following that, we take on the Elder Lion. We down him very, very quickly. You'll notice that I use the grappling hook with the follow-up attack quite a lot here. It saves me stamina, it rarely misses, it does incredible damage, and by the time the Elder Lion goes down, my ultimate is actually charged again for the next boss. Looking at my options after defeating the boss, I don't need a bleed weapon, as I have one and it's a great sword. Troll's Golden Sword isn't exactly great for me. Increased FP is not always good for Wylder, but sometimes you get some devastating weapon skills. I'm banking maybe I'll get one later on, so I decide to take the increased FP just in case that happens. We decide to head to the center castle after this, even though you typically want to do this on day 2 just because of where we are. There are not a lot of good options of places to go. We peek our head in. We see that it's the Red Wolf, which is a middle-of-the-road boss. It's not an easy boss, but it's not exactly the hardest boss. I also have my ultimate up, so as soon as they get in there, I decide to ult. So my options after defeating this are not really that many things that are good for me. A Queen Rot Spear isn't exactly great. It does Holy. We're not facing a weak to Holy boss. The Erd Tree Bow is a bow. I don't really use bows, although the Effect on it, multiple periodic glint blades would be not bad if I held it in my offhand, and successful parries activate golden retaliation is not good for me. I'm not pairing. So what I do to decide here is to loot the bow and go ahead and give it to my archer so that he can use this, because those glint blades are going to be good for him. Rain of Arrows is a great weapon skill, and this is just a great bow overall. Then I quickly level up and I'm about to head upstairs to get a talisman. Fex tells me that she's looted a golden whip that has fire damage. We're going to be fighting a fire weak boss, the ice dragon. So even though I'm not a huge fan of whips, this is actually a really good whip because its weapon skill, Flame Dance, has a really large AoE radius, which will be fantastic against a dragon and any other bosses that are weak to fire. So looking over my choice of talismans, Millicent's Prothesis is the easiest choice here. I don't have rapid attacking weapons like some class, but the extra dexterity will give me a little extra damage, and I do hit kind of okay speed with a great sword, so I can trigger this with some regularity, even though this would probably be better on a faster weapon attacking class. The other two options were just not that great. So then we head outside and decide to kill the lion there to get another reward. There is a great sword or improved sorcery incantations after defeating him. Obviously the choice here is the great sword. So at this point I could put the second greatsword in my offhand and dual wield if I wanted. It doesn't have bleed build-up, so it's less effective than if it had bleed in terms of trying to proc bleed, which if it had I probably would have put it in my offhand. And also again, because when you use the grappling hook with a follow-up attack, it's only using your main hand weapon, and I use it so frequently, two-handing just isn't that viable to me. It's not super useful, even though you could do it here if you want. Fex notes there's a large shield on the ground. She pings it for me. I pick it up. It's great when you're playing Wylder sometimes to have the option of blocking. You're not Guardian, so you're not going to be predominantly blocking or anything like that. You play much more aggressively than Guardian does. You spend your stamina aggressively and only block when you have to. But if you're playing a one-handed style like I am and you're using grappling hooks so much that you rarely even would use two-handed, or if you have bleed on one weapon but not the other, it makes sense to have something in the offhand. And if it's a weapon that's great, that has a good weapon skill, you can switch to and use really quick. But if not, kind of makes sense to have a shield there. So since we're here and the Banished Knights are nearby, we decide to keep killing them for XP. They don't give as much as the Crucible Knights, but they're a little bit faster to kill and they still give a decent amount of XP. So we just kind of make our way about it. And after clearing all those Banished Knights and the couple extra enemies, you can see my ultimate is almost already charged again. I also have a choice of more stamina or a Rotten Crystal Sword here. More stamina would be great, no doubt, but I don't have a rotten weapon already, so I decide to take the weapon with Scarlet Rot because this is really effective against a lot of bosses in this game, and you want to have Scarlet Rot somehow if you can. Then we make our way to a nearby church. They've already defeated the enemies there, and there is the option of a seal or another greatsword. I don't need another greatsword at this point. I take the seal because it has Burn O Flame on it, which would be great for the dragon because it has a huge AoE radius if you can get under it, and I drop it for Fex. So then with the Nightreign closing in, we make our way towards the end of day area, and there's a rise nearby. I try and open it, can't find it. Looking at it again, I can actually see it, but for some reason I couldn't see where it was. It's actually this little platform that's on the side wall that's masquerading that's not normally there. So it takes me a lot longer to open this than it should have, but we do eventually get it open. Up at the top, the choices aren't really great for me. There is a decent staff there, so I grab it for effects and drop it because it has Common Azure on it. And she may or may not use this in the final boss, but she might use it on other bosses in the meantime. And, you know, rises typically have things that are good for mages, not necessarily me, but it's always good to try and help out your recluse if she's there, or if you have a revenant, you might sometimes get something for them. So in the end of day area, there's a Burial Watchdog there that I was trying to rot. I don't know if you can actually rot them. I decide after attacking a few times it's probably better to switch something else. I know you can't bleed them, so I put Banished Knight in my right hand, Banished Knight's Greatsword in my right hand instead, so I can do more damage with my attacks. So So in the Smelter Demon fight, I ult right away in order to get some stance damage on him. Fire is obviously not the ideal damage type against this boss, unfortunately, so the follow-up attack, the buffs are weapon with fire, and this are not the greatest against this boss, but it's not a difficult boss. And you'll notice mid-fight I actually check what the weapon skill in my weapon is because I couldn't see from the icon what it was and I couldn't remember, so I checked, find out it's Warcry, buff myself with Warfire really quickly. And during this fight, I'm playing very, very aggressively. I'm not worried about how much damage I'm taking. I'm trying to do as much damage as I can, only backing away for AoEs. I grapple into the boss every time an AoE is over to get back in range and keep attacking as quickly as possible. This would probably be a good opportunity for a weapon skill if you had a good one. Unfortunately, mine is just a buff. Or if you wanted to two-hand greatswords to deal more damage, this would have been a good time to do it as well. So in the beginning of day 2, we actually head over to a Frost Ruins very quickly to pick up some boss buffs from the boss that was defeated there that our Iron Eye actually killed on day 1. And there aren't a lot of great options here. Reduced FP consumption is what I go with. I do have the Giant's Red Braid that I am planning to use in the boss fight, and it does use a bit of FP, so it should help me cast more of that. And again, you should always be planning for the final boss fight when doing these runs. Most of the end of day bosses are not that difficult. There are a couple exceptions like Nameless King and things like that. But generally, you're not going to die on day 1 and day 2, and that last boss is what you should be prioritized when deciding what buffs to select and what weapons to select. We then head to a nearby church and pick up another flask. That's 2 we've picked up now. This should be enough for most bosses. If you can get a third, that's great. The 2 is definitely the minimum, I would say. So we then head to a nearby camp, defeat the red mains there, dividing and conquering, and we check the chests because they're right nearby. Normally, I don't get very good things out of these chests. If you're playing other night fairs, there you can get good passive buffs on some of this stuff, but when you're playing Wylder, you generally are looking for a weapon that has a good weapon skill or just a good weapon in general. And you usually get like a white or blue gear in these, very rarely blue. A lot of the times it's white, so it's generally not worth looting them. And the buff I decide to pick up is either the Golem Greatbow for the extra range damage to give to my Iron Eye or the improved stance breaking. Stance breaking is just so powerful in this game, so I decide to take that because when enemies and bosses are staggered, they can't deal damage to you, and you can do a lot of damage to them, so stance breaks is just really strong. So then we decide to take the Skyway over to the mine in order to pick up a Smithing Stone 2 so we can upgrade something to purple later on. I do have the Giant's Red Braid, so it's not likely it's going to be that for me, but I could give it to a party member, or I could upgrade the Flamberge with it, or I could upgrade my shield for better guard boost. As soon as we get inside, I ult the pumpkin head guy. I fucking hate this guy. His head smashes are so annoying, so I just want to burst him down as quickly as possible so I don't have to deal with it. Next, we head to another nearby rise. You normally won't do that many of these, but since, again, we have Recluse in the party, there's an option for maybe a good staff for her with some good spells. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. I end up getting the Fire Shot and Crack Cure to boost fire damage, which could come in handy in the boss fight, or it could come in handy for another character that's like effects, like that's flinging fire spells, for instance. She also drops me 2 talismans. One is Warrior Jarred Shard that increases skill attack power, so this is going to be great for the Giant's Red Braid. That's going to make that fire deal even more damage when we get into the boss fight. We then hit another nearby church, and the Iron Eye is using the bow that I dropped him earlier. It's got the glint blades over it. It's got good damage. So that was definitely a good call, and he's just wisely using it in order to deal the most possible damage. Remember that Glint Blades too, even though they might not deal the most damage, also deal stance damage and make it easier to stance break bosses. So as the circle begins to move inward towards the end of day 2, we decide to move into the Rot area. There are a lot of bosses in this area that you can farm for lots of XP. There's also a Scarlet Rot Keep. If you can get in there and defeat enemies in there, you can get Scarlet Rot weapons. So we make our way in there. And the main thing you have to be careful when going to the Scarlet Rot area is some of the bosses are extremely deadly. So you really have to be picky and choosy about the ones you face. So I get to the Scarlet Rot first on one of the bosses. I notice it's Black Blade Kindred, so we nope the fuck out of there. That is definitely not a boss we want to spend time fighting. It's definitely defeatable at this point, but you will waste a lot of time fighting that boss, and it's very likely that you will die maybe at least once, one of your characters that will have to run back, and you do have the risk of maybe potentially losing some of your runes if you don't get them back before you die again. So we quickly audible to the next boss. I meet up with the team there, and it's a Tree Sentinel, which is much more doable. These bosses are really tanky for some reason in this game, but their moveset should be familiar to anyone who's played Elden Ring, and they're not so hard to down, they just take a lot of time. You'll notice, by the way, that even though we're taking continuous Scarlet Rot buildup, and then when we have Scarlet Rot, we're taking damage over time, it's not nearly as much damage as Scarlet Rot does in the base game, so you can pretty much just heal through it most of the time. So for options, I don't have the greatest options here after we defeat this boss. I already do have a Rot weapon, but Anspur Rapier is also fire in this case. And I figure Fire Anspur is better than Magic Crystal Rotten Sword versus the endgame boss or end of run boss, so I decided to switch it out for that. So the next boss we come to is a Bell-Bearing Hunter, so again, we nope out. This is another boss you don't want to spend time facing. It's tanky, it hits like a truck. It's just a waste of time most of the time, and when you get it in the middle of a castle at the, sometimes at the bottom, it can be really rough. So typically skip this boss if you can. Then we come to Erdtree Avatar, and this is absolutely fantastic. This is a much easier boss. It's weak to fire. We've been stockpiling fire weapons and spells the whole fight. My ultimate does fire damage. So this is a no-brainer for a Wylder character. So for the first part of the fight, I'm pressing the advantage, trying to be as aggressive as possible. Wylder's ultimate does quite a bit of stance damage. Rancor Call does quite a bit of stance damage. I'm trying to get that stance break because I know it's close, so I'm being very aggressive with my attacks. As soon as I get that stance break, I switch to the Giant's Red Braid and start using its weapon skill because it does tons of fire damage in an AoE. And again, you can see how aggressively I'm playing here. I know I'm going to get hit by some of these attacks, but I'm trying to get that fire on the ground anyway to speed up this fight, maybe get in one more boss before we have to get into the circle. I have plenty of flasks left to heal with. We haven't gone down, so even if I go down, it's not going to be hard to get me up. My ultimate is almost charged, so I'm just trying to press as hard as I can for, and be as aggressive as possible. If you're playing Guardian, you're going to be tanking a bit more, like with your shield blocking a bit and just trying to hold the boss in place on you if possible so that your teammates can range into it, but I'm playing very, very aggressively because I'm playing Wylder. So looking at the choices of my rewards, we have Health and Steeple, which is a very good weapon, but it does Frostbite buildup, which is not particularly useful against this boss. Additionally, its weapon skill buffs its weapon, which will be overridden if you have the follow-up attack that buffs your weapon in fire, so it's not a great weapon in general if you're using the relic that allows you to use a follow-up. So I get the Grafted Dragon. This does fire damage, which is absolutely fantastic, and it does it in a big, huge AoE radius, so I plan on using this against the boss if I don't use the whip. So unfortunately, our only options are take on the Bell-Bearing Hunter or get to the middle of the circle and kind of end the day there, so we don't take our chances against the Bell-Bearing Hunter. I have ended runs trying to be greedy before, especially on day 2 in this area, so I decided not to. We just get in there and we just feed the enemies. So when Godskin Noble spawns, the first thing I do is switch to my Anspur Rapier and I apply Scarlet Rot to him. This is one of the reasons, again, that Wylder should be stockpiling weapons for each occasion, because this is a great opportunity to get some damage onto a boss that just ticks away while he rolls all over the screen or jumps all over the screen. So once I get Scarlet Rot applied, I switch back to my Flamberge. This will allow me to trigger Hemorrhage procs on the boss, and it also will allow me to do the follow-up again on Grappling Hook, which can help out a lot in this fight because these bosses can be somewhat mobile sometimes. And as soon as the Godskin Apostle spawns, I decide to do my ultimate, trying to hit both at the same time. So then I end up pseudo-tanking Godskin Apostle while they finish off Godskin Noble, and you'll see my Scarlet Rod is still ticking on that boss for some time, which helps me damage him even when I'm facing a different boss. So I end up transitioning to playing a little bit more defensively while I'm tanking Godskin Apostle, because I'm waiting for them to finish off Godskin Noble so I can be aggressive again. But once Godskin Noble goes down, the boss starts doing all these sort of crazy attacks that don't really afford me an opportunity to get in there. Then he hard locks onto me, so I spend a lot of time just avoiding his attacks while they're ranging into him before I get the opportunity to attack again. So once we get into the end of day area, I start rearranging my weapons to make sure I can use the Grafted Dragon in my left hand, and then I buy some stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't buy any Starlight Shards, which later on in this fight I wish I had bought at least one because of how devastating this weapon's skill was. I wasn't expecting it to be that strong against the boss, even though I expected to do well. If I would have had at least one Starlight Shard, this fight would have gone even faster. But you're going to see in this fight how devastating this weapon's skill is because of the fire damage in an area that it does under a large boss. And I also have Warrior Jar Shard, which increases its damage. So sometimes, again, it's about the weapons that you're given when you're playing Wylder and not necessarily about trying to force a playstyle, even though you're being given something else. So the first thing I do at the beginning of this fight is I get in close with Antspur and I try and trigger Scarlet Rot on the boss. And once it's on the boss, that's when I start going to town with the Grafted Dragon doing fire damage. And eventually when the boss is at about a third health or a quarter health, I run out of FP. Wish I would have had a Starlight Shard so I could keep using this. This fight would have gone faster. But eventually we get this boss down, and it was pretty much an easy victory just because of the amount of fire damage that I was able to do in this fight. So that kind of wraps up our video on Wylder. I hope you kind of got some insight onto how to play this class a little bit. It's a bit of a strange class because it demands a lot of in-game knowledge, especially from Elden Ring in terms of weapon skills, what weapons do, you know, what boss resistances are, whether they can be Scarlet Rot, Blood, or Poison. This can really dictate what weapons you pick up. But I tried to give you a priority list earlier, which I'll mention again here. You want to check if a weapon has Scarlet Rot, and then you want to check its weapon skill, then you want to check if it's a greatsword, you want to check if it has bleed, and then you want to check what its passive effect is. Again, I don't prioritize passive effects on Wylder because it's more about the weapons that he has than the passive effects. There are other classes out there that rely on this more, but Wylder doesn't really need the passive effects in order to survive and succeed. If you like this sort of video, let me know in the comments. We can do it for each of the classes. I was just kind of curious if you guys would find this enjoyable or not. And as always, if you have other tips about Wylder or maybe things I should have done differently in this run or questions about things I did in this run, let me know in the comments below.
Thank you.